Part 2, Chapter 5 of The Idiot. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Translated by Eva M. Martin. Part 2, Chapter 5. It was late now, nearly 2:30, and the prince did not find General Epanchin at home. He left a card and determined to look up Colia, who had a room at a small hotel near. Colia was not in, but he was informed that he might be back shortly, and had left word that if he were not in by 3:30, it was to be understood that he had gone to Pavlovsk to General Epanchin's and would dine there. The prince decided to wait till 3:30 and ordered some dinner. At 3:30 there was no sign of Colia. The prince waited until 4 o'clock and then strolled off mechanically, wherever his feet should carry him. In early summer there are often magnificent days in St. Petersburg, bright, hot and still. This happened to be such a day. For some time the prince wandered about without aim or object. He did not know the town well. He stopped to look about him on bridges, at street corners. He entered a confectioner's shop to rest once. He was in a state of nervous excitement and perturbation. He noticed nothing and no one, and he felt a craving for solitude, to be alone with his thoughts and his emotions, and to give himself up to them passively. He loathed the idea of trying to answer the questions that would rise up in his heart and mind. "I am not to blame for all this," he thought to himself, half unconsciously. Towards 6 o'clock he found himself at the station of the Tsarskosselsky railway. He was tired of solitude now. A new rush of feeling took hold of him, and a flood of light chased away the gloom for a moment from his soul. He took a ticket to Pavlovsk and determined to get there as fast as he could, but something stopped him. A reality and not a fantasy, as he was inclined to think it. He was about to take his place in a carriage when he suddenly threw away his ticket and came out again, disturbed and thoughtful. A few moments later, in the street, he recalled something that had bothered him all the afternoon. He caught himself engaged in a strange occupation, which he now recollected he had taken up at odd moments for the last few hours. It was looking about all around him for something, he did not know what. He had forgotten it for a while, half an hour or so, and now, suddenly, the uneasy search had recommenced. But he had hardly become conscious of this curious phenomenon when another recollection suddenly swam through his brain, interesting him for the moment exceedingly. He remembered that the last time he had been engaged in looking around him for the unknown something, he was standing before a cutler's shop, in the window of which were exposed certain goods for sale. He was extremely anxious now to discover whether this shop and these goods really existed, or whether the whole thing had been a hallucination. He felt in a very curious condition today, a condition similar to that which had preceded his fits in bygone years. He remembered that at such times he had been particularly absent-minded, and could not discriminate between objects and persons unless he concentrated special attention upon them. He remembered seeing something in the window marked at 60 kopecks. Therefore, if the shop existed, and if this object were really in the window, it would prove that he had been able to concentrate his attention on this article at a moment when, as a general rule, his absence of mind would have been too great to admit of any such concentration. In fact, very shortly after he had left the railway station in such a state of agitation. So he walked back looking about him for the shop, and his heart beat with intolerable impatience. Ah, here was the very shop, and there was the article marked 60 kop. Of course it's 60 kopecks, he thought, and certainly worth no more. This idea amused him, and he laughed. But it was a hysterical laugh. He was feeling terribly oppressed. He remembered clearly that just here, standing before this window, he had suddenly turned round, just as earlier in the day he had turned and found the dreadful eyes of Rogojin fixed upon him. Convinced, therefore, that in this respect, at all events, he had been under no delusion, he left the shop and went on. This must be thought out. It was clear that there had been no hallucination at the station then either. Something had actually happened to him on both occasions. There was no doubt of it. But again a loathing for all mental exertion overmastered him. He would not think it out now. He would put it off and think of something else. He remembered that during his epileptic fits, or rather immediately preceding them, he had always experienced a moment or two when his whole heart and mind and body seemed to wake up to vigour and light, when he became filled with joy and hope, and all his anxieties seemed to be swept away for ever. These moments were but presentiments, as it were, of the one final second. It was never more than a second in which the fit came upon him. That second, of course, was inexpressible. When his attack was over and the prince reflected on his symptoms, he used to say to himself, "These moments, short as they are, when I feel such extreme consciousness of myself, and consequently more of life than at other times, are due only to the disease, to the sudden rupture of normal conditions. Therefore they are not really a higher kind of life, but a lower." This reasoning, however, seemed to end in a paradox, and lead to the further consideration: what matter though it be only disease, an abnormal tension of the brain, if when I recall and analyse the moment, it seems to have been one of harmony and beauty in the highest degree, an instant of deepest sensation, overflowing with unbounded joy and rapture, ecstatic devotion, and completest life. Vague though this sounds, it was perfectly comprehensible to Muishkin, though he knew that it was but a feeble expression of his sensations. That there was indeed beauty and harmony in those abnormal moments, that they really contained the highest synthesis of life, he could not doubt, nor even admit the possibility of doubt. He felt that they were not analogous to the fantastic and unreal dreams due to intoxication by hashish, opium, or wine. Of that he could judge when the attack was over. These instants were characterized, to define it in a word, by an intense quickening of the sense of personality. Since in the last conscious moment preceding the attack, he could say to himself, with full understanding of his words, "I would give my whole life for this one instant," then doubtless to him it really was worth a lifetime.